All right. Well, hello, everyone. Welcome to today's Informational Fridays encore presentation of preparing for financials and supply chain management changes. My name is Dave Thomas. I'm Vice President of Sales and Marketing for Bales and Associates. And before we get started, and if you're not familiar with Bales, we're going to take a minute to give you an overview on our organization. If you could go to the next slide, please. Next slide. All right, thank you. Bales and Associates has been in the Infor ecosystem for over 26 years. We're entirely Infor focused. We do nothing but Infor implementations, upgrades, and managed services. And we support all aspects of the technology, including S3, Landmark, and the Cloud Suite products, HCM, finance, and supply chain management. In fact, we've been recognized and given partnering awards in 8 out of the last 10 years. Our consultants bring 15 plus years of consulting experience in the space with an equivalent and professional experience. Some were former benefits managers, compensation managers, directors of supply chain, as well as former controllers and CFOs. In 2020, we were awarded by the Class Research Group. We were awarded Best in Class, which means we got highest ratings for all implementers in the Infor ecosystem for implementing Infor. We're really excited about that. And it has a lot to do with the processes and tools we use to help customers implement Infor, as well as support of Bales management to provide our team with what is necessary to be successful. And other exciting news for Bales in 2021, back in February 1st, we became part of Nordic Consulting, an industry-leading healthcare consulting firm. We'll operate as a wholly owned subsidiary and continue to be led by Jamie Bales as president. Nordic will provide us with resources to fund our growth, expand our business, and support our customers more effectively. For healthcare customers, it allows us to bring together the Nordic capabilities in the EHR space to provide a more holistic solution, including specific expertise in EHR and ERP integration. This combination will offer a best practices model to reduce implementation risks, leveraging the data from both systems, and to drive insights and outcomes. With that, I'm going to turn it over to today's presenters. Thank you.
Thanks, Dave. So yeah, and I'll start off first here. I'm Mark Borsheim. Actually, John, if you want to go to the next slide. Now, my counterpart John is going to be doing the bulk of the presentation today. But as Dave mentioned, we've got a lot of experience across the board. It's part of the reason we have such a great class rating. I myself, like many of our consultants here, were clients of Bales prior to coming on board and getting into consulting. So we have a lot of real practical experience and a lot of, I guess, empathy for, working both sides of these projects, of these implementations, right? Having to balance our day-to-day along with some of these large implementation projects. So we've been doing it for a long time. Like I said, most of our consultants, like John, who's going to be starting here in a second, have done it on both sides, both from the consulting side and from the client side. So a lot of experience, and yeah, a lot of experience across multiple industries too, not just healthcare. So, John, you want to go ahead and introduce yourself?
Sure, absolutely. My name is John Simpson. One of the senior financial consultants here at Bales. Got about 20 years of experience, both in finance and consulting. I like Mark. We've worked in a bunch of different industries, including telecom. I've worked in the telecom industry, retail, and healthcare, both as a client, as a consultant. I'm an Infor certified consultant for the V11 product suite. So I've done a lot of different things, and as a client, worked in basically FP&A and accounting. In the logistics department and IT department, and then, so we have a good breadth of experience as clients, which kind of helps us identify, I think, with our clients as we're doing consulting. So just a quick disclaimer. The information provided in this presentation is related to version 11. So any of the material contained within this presentation is for general purposes only. It's general information only. So I wouldn't solely rely on this material information as a basis for making business or legal, procedural, system-related decisions. So we make no representations or warranties of any kind, expressed or implied, about the accuracy or liability, suitability, or availability with respect to the information presented for any purpose. So any reliance you guys place on the material without consultation is strictly at your own risk. It's highly recommended. Hey, talk to us at Bales and Associates, and we'll make sure that the solutions are tailored specifically to your needs. So always got to go with the disclaimer. So with that, we're gonna discuss some of the key differences between the S3 system and the new Infor FSM format when one upgrades to version 11. So one of the first items I'd like to go over at this time is the navigation. So navigation has changed quite a bit in version 11 compared to all the previous versions of S3. V10 and prior, users used the form numbers to navigate or used flowcharts if the number wasn't known. In FSM, users are going to navigate using the drop-down menus, kind of like a website actually. These menus will change depending on the role the user is using. Different roles have different access, and so as users learn what the best tool for the job is in FSM when operating the system, they can choose the role that best fits that. While a departure from what users are used to in S3 with memorizing form numbers, navigating in FSM is an intuitive process, I think, and it's really easily learned and exploited once you get comfortable with it. So users in FSM will be using the menu bar on the left-hand side to navigate the system. The roles can be changed at the top of the menu bar, as you can see up there where it says controller. Users navigate using the drop-down menus that drop down for each of the roles. So clicking on any of the menu items will take you to the related screen, kind of like putting in a form number, but it's all kind of laid out there for you. Additionally, this same menu bar has the print manager, job scheduler, and other user action options at the top of the menu bar. So whereas in S3, you may be in, have to go to print manager, or in certain reports, go to print manager. The print manager is always there for you at any point in time that you need it, which is kind of a nice little thing if you print as many things as I have over the years. In S3, you have to go to the print manager, right? So it's a little bit different. Also, at the top, there's a really robust search function that a user can use to search keywords to grab a menu item. The search will change kind of based on the role, but if somebody has a lot of access, like application administrator, which gives you kind of the keys to everything, you can pretty much search any menu and find it from that point. It saves you a lot of time if you tend to memorize, menu names and things like that. One of the other nice things in FSM is they have actually the ability to bookmark key pages. So if you have some things you frequently use, you can bookmark these pages. It works a lot like, kind of like your browser in anything else, right? You can manage and edit bookmarks in this location and stuff like that. So it's kind of an easy one-stop shop if you have things that you use a lot. I know you could do the same thing in S3, but you had to go and actually create each one of those things, and FSM just kind of, click a bookmark and save the page. So one of the main things that FSM has is what's called a list view. List views are a really key component of version 11. They actually replace part of the reporting as well, where you basically have list views of all your records that are associated with the business class that you're in. List views can be found in, like I was saying, most every menu in version 11. And as you can see, the toolbar at the top allows for actions to be taken related to the list below. These lists are modifiable in V11 to add extra related fields and reorder if needed as well. And we'll talk a little about that down, but it makes it a really good tool. Lists are a key departure from S3, and honestly, I think it's a lot easier way to digest the data. You don't have to run reports. You can just go to these list views and pull the data up. All the data within this stuff and all the lists and the forms that we'll be talking about, they're stored in what are called business classes. These replace the tables in S3, and are referenced when querying data or modifying lists when we're doing INSD, which is another thing that we'll talk about a little bit later. So talking about forms, forms are also used in version 11 and allows users to be able to view or manipulate data associated with the business class. At the top of the form are actions and options related to the form. Additionally, on the left, as you can see, tabs are located on the form to assist with navigating the different parts of the form. So like in this case with the requisition, you've got lines, header details, lines, defaults, and procedure information as well. You could also see that there's an embedded list in here for their lines. So you will have list views all over the place, even within forms. Forms also have what are called required fields when filling in data. These would be marked with a red asterisk. There's none right here because this is a completed form, but those kind of are required fields when creating data. So that's kind of an easy identifier for when users are using forms. One of the nice things with forms and lists, and also in S3, but is they have what's called the drill around function. So over there in the top right, you can see the little 3 dots in the corner. You can actually do drill around in a lot of forms and a lot of lists once you click on the data to be able to go to the source data if needed. So it's right there and very connected. So forms, lists, and other screens can be modified using configurations and personalizations. What these do, they write changes in the top of the delivered code from Infor. Personalizations and configurations can be used to customize pretty much any screen in version 11 to improve experience. We were talking about list views earlier. That's one of those items that you can configure quite a bit. You can add or remove fields, reorder columns or lists, default fields if needed, and more. The configuration will change the screen for all users and is done at the admin level. So basically, I change using configuration for the list view, and that changes absolutely everything. Whereas, personalizations is something that, it's something that each person does. So a person can go in, do a lot of the same things with configurations and personalize the list views for what they need. We actually, as a consulting firm, we do have some configurations we tend to do right off the bat when we work with new clients, or we actually configure some of the screens. Is the way that we would like to look at it, because as clients, we're used to seeing things and we have kind of an idea of what we want to see. So we like to present those right off the bat and say, hey, we configured certain things, please take a look and we can change it. So one of the things to kind of know about the configurations and personalizations, though, is the code sits on top of the existing code. So once you have a CU update, which being on multi-tenant, you get updates constantly every month where they, put out new code. Sometimes you actually have to go and maintain those. So one of the next items I'd like to talk about is security. So version 11 takes a different approach to security than S3 versions of Infor. The main difference in security is the approach of role-based security versus form-based. So in S3, users were assigned forms to their ID to allow access based on their clearance. FSM works a little bit differently, where security is assigned based on rules. So as a user is created, rules are assigned to that person based on what their clearance should be. So in essence, for FSM, security is top down and not bottom up, which is what you did in S3. Speaking of roles, standard roles, there are standard roles in FSM that are updated monthly with the CU updates by Infor. Those standard roles work great to be able to get people the access they need. They have predefined access with screens, making admin's job easier setting up new users. So you have an accountant, you know what rules you assign that accountant, and you get them done quickly and easily. So there are actually the ability to do custom rules as well, but much like a configuration or a personalization, you have to maintain those rules because occasionally codes change quite a bit and one has to go in and clean those up. Another difference that I'd like to discuss briefly is the ability to export from Print Manager. And I did talk about this briefly earlier, but S3, when you use Print Manager, you actually, there's a lot of jobs in S3 and FSM that you pull out of Print Manager. These output formats are determined by the user at different points in the process. So as an example, the accrual reconciliation report that you have in FSM is the same as the AP 136 in S3. Whereas you run an AP 136, You get a PDF that pops up, you close the PDF, there's a CSV there right afterwards. FSM works a little differently. So you actually pick your output prior to you actually running the report. So, but that makes it a little easier. It's one less stop. You don't have to go through things if you're looking for the CSV file. So I tend to like that a lot. So I'm always looking for the CSV. One of the additional things with FSM as well is they actually offered additional Excel export versus CSV. So you could actually export directly to Excel, and it's a little bit cleaner, and it works really well. The next topic I'd like to review is actually reporting and the differences between S3 and FSM. FSM has developed a lot of tools for reporting data for both standard reporting and analysis tools. Additionally, FSM offers different built-in list views that are customizable and replace some of the reporting as S3. The thing we were talking about before with the lists, they're a really great tool. And so a lot of the reports in S3, there's lists now. In S3, RW reporting tool is used to create and delivered standardized reports to users as required. FSM has developed delivered reporting out of two different modules, Infor BI and Burst. Both options offer different suites of delivered reports, and both of these options should be reviewed really to determine what the best path forward is for any company's needs. One of the nice things about BI reports also is the ability to drill back. So one could actually open the report, run a report, and drill right back to the source document right back into Infor and right down to the source document as needed. So it's kind of an effective tool for variance analysis that users can use. Additionally, one of the great tools in FSM as a replacement for some of the reporting in S3 are the list views. I tend to come back to this a lot, but I do love the list views. List views are found pretty much everywhere, like we talked about, easily navigable. List views can also be refreshed on the spot and can be expanded to see over 200 rows at a time. So, there's a lot of data that you can grab even on the screen at one point in time. Like we've talked about before, you can filter, you can modify, and you can export directly from the screen in Excel or PDF right from any list view. Additionally, you could actually drill into list views and drill around to the source transaction. So as you have all the transactions in this list view or whatever you happen to be looking at, it's an easy, direct way to drill back to the source. I have an AP invoice in the journal ledger that comes across. I can drill into that. A couple of drills later, I'm right back to the source invoice. So it's a really direct line back to the source data. I find it as a massive time saver when needing a quick data search and extract versus S3. I'm not running a report, then looking up GL95 to get the data and to find the variance. I'm literally going directly into the data to get to the source. Home pages are another tool that can be used for reporting and analysis in FSM. Default home pages are different by role, and they've been tailored out of the box to reflect common high traffic experience for that role. So if you're AP manager, you get something like this. You're managing your invoices count and everything like that. Controller may have a different set of roles that actually has the common choices that one makes as a controller right there and then. So there's really no need to even drill back into the menu. You can go just directly there. Believe it or not, home pages can also be customized by the role, and admins have the ability to tailor these home pages as well as build custom ones if needed. So users can drill directly from the home pages to do the analysis as they need. One of the great tools in S3 was the ability to query and upload data to and from Excel. Infor offers a
Sorry to interrupt you. We have a few questions in the chat.
Oh, sure, absolutely.
Yeah, so the first one is, does Infor updates impact configurations and or personalizations?
Yes, they do. In some cases, it depends on the amount of code and what code was rewritten. So if you have, as an example, let's say you set up a vendor, a configuration on a vendor, and I can give you a perfect example. We had a configuration on a vendor, and they also have a different way of getting back to the banking information, and they changed the way that banking information was viewed. That configuration was on top of it ended up kind of messing up that particular screen. So it's an easy fix to go in and rebuild the configuration, but it kind of, you can't get back to the data you need. So yes, sometimes it happens, a lot of times it doesn't. But as you have a CU update, Infor actually gives you the CU update and the information of what business classes and what actions that it fixes. So admins can easily review those every month as they come out, and then review the configurations to make sure they still work.
Okay, great. Next question is, how do you create a report from list views?
So it's a little bit different. Basically what it is the list view themselves kind of replace it. So if I have a common report that I'm looking at, and I'm trying to think of a perfect report. So I think there's some reports where you would print out, let's say on AP, maybe there's a report to be able to print out your released invoices, for instance, and you would run a report and get that list. So in this particular case, you would actually just be able to export in a list view your released invoices, or so I guess that would be, it sort of replaces some of the reports, I guess. And you really just, you configure it to how you want to see, you filter it to how you want to see the data, and then you can just export it.
Okay, and next question is a pretty detailed question. So if we want to take it offline later, feel free to let me know. But in preparing for FSM, where do we start with setting up a new general ledger structure? Can you go over key attribute values with systems like Epic or other things you've seen handy when building the GL structure? In addition, what source application rework do we look at before FSM to better align with the new FSM structure?
That is a very detailed question. So I guess I will give the very, very short answer, but there's a lot more to it than this short answer. And so I will, and Mark, please chime in if I'm missing anything on this. But the first thing that I would look at, I suppose, let's say it's S3 versus FSM. You have companies in S3, and what we have now is entities in FSM. It's a little bit different, but kind of the same. So what I guess one would want to do is take a look at their existing structure, design how they would like the structure to be. Like, in other words, let's say I have a lot of companies and I want to collapse this to maybe 2 or 3. Maybe try to understand what you want going forward. And then really, that's when you take a look and see, okay, so I have entities and I'm going to build structure off the entity and kind of build from there. There's some flexibility with Infor that is really, so then I guess this is the long part, right? There's some flexibility with the FSM product that was not available in S3. Flexible hierarchies being for instance, there's a lot more you can do with the hierarchy structure in FSM that is easily changeable. That was really, really rigid in S3. And so understanding some of the attributes of what FSM can do will really kind of help. So the first thing would be talk to your consultants, get an assessment of what you've got going on, and then really they can kind of work with you to show the key attributes of the strengths of FSM, and you can kind of design it towards that. I know that's kind of a high level answer, but there's kind of a lot to it. Did I miss anything?
Yeah. Yeah, I'll add on to that just a little bit. And we do have actually a specific presentation, I believe, for this too. So we'll try to get the link maybe to that recording, I think, out to everybody. But kind of specifically, what we've seen, particularly in healthcare relating to things like Epic, right, is taking advantage of, what Infor's FSM has, which is this new dimension structure, right? So getting to that general ledger structure, where we can add, new dimension components, for instance, like payor, to kind of feed some of that Epic information that maybe was just coming over summarized. We can start to get a little bit more of it, granularly in the system. Maybe you want things by the payer source, maybe you want them by different, bill codes, things like that. We can begin, and that's a really nice thing about the new Infor structure. It isn't that rigid. Sort of, you have a company, you have an accounting unit, you have an account, right? Now we have those things certainly, but we have all of these other potential measures that we can apply to different transactions to bring and capture that data in the database so that we can pivot on it and report on it in different ways. And to John's point, it absolutely is sitting down and kind of assessing where you are today and what kinds of reporting, because it really comes back to reporting, what kinds of reporting and analytics are you looking to get out of the system that we can maybe capture from those existing interfaces like an Epic? In terms, and just to kind of go to the other piece of that, I don't want to derail John's presentation completely, but in terms of rework, and this is true whether you're coming from an existing Lawson or Infor environment, from completely out of the Infor system or internally, it's about the same kind of cleanup stuff that we always have to do, right? So cleaning up your vendor masters, cleaning up your asset management, masters, going through and purging and actually disposing of those assets, that no longer exist, or cleaning up those vendors that are no longer valid. Another great one too, to get to what John was talking about, let's say we have an old hierarchy, so to speak, of old company structure that's no longer really relevant. Starting to work on what those crosswalks look like. It's a great way to kind of be able to hit the ground running. We've done this with other clients as well, where, we can kind of have some preliminary discussions to sort of figure out what that future state structure is. And then, the client can start actually building out what that crosswalk is going to look like, what that structure, how that data is going to need to be converted or changed. And it really can expedite the process for conversion. And that goes straight to the subsystems as well. It's a little bit, we have a little bit more flexibility because of the differences in the system to be able to remap a lot of that subsystem data as well, unlike we did in those previous upgrade cycles where you're really just moving exactly what you had into a new system. This is a real opportunity to sort of transform it and kind of go differently. But like I said, great question, and one that I think we'd love to talk about. Certainly one that I think if whoever put that in the chat, might behoove you to reach out to us. We'd love to chat a little bit more detail about it. Sorry, John, back to you.
No problem at all. Thanks, Mark. I appreciate it. Yeah, I'm going to echo what Mark said. The flexible dimensions is huge, and to be able to get detailed data in there, I mean, that's just a great attribute of the system. I mean, we could probably talk for the next 30 minutes or 2 hours on this subject. So, I'm sorry, Molly, was there any other beyond that one?
That's it for now. I'll let you know at the next break in your presentation if we have more.
Sure. Okay. So the next item that I want to go over are queries and uploads. For me, one of the great tools in S3 that I used quite a bit was the add-ins, being able to query data and upload data to and from Excel. This to me was a huge thing for me. I used quite a bit, and I used the same thing in Infor, which we call Spreadsheet Designer, quite a bit as well. I guess it's just habit. I like both products. I actually like the ISD product better, and I'll kind of go through why in a second. But I do want to discuss briefly the query and uploading process for both systems and talk about some of the key differences. So both add-ins and ISD, they offer the ability to query and upload data into the system using Excel. And that's what we use for the basis of manipulating the data. So S3 queries and uploads are set up by users using tables and fields. And also with S3, the queries and uploads are built each unique file format. So you got your DME files and you got your upload files and stuff like that. And both of those are built in a slightly different fashion. FSM works a little bit differently, where they're actually built directly in Excel. So I'm not actually building an external file that I got to keep somewhere to run. I actually build it right into Excel, which is nice. And we use the business classes, which we discussed earlier, to do this. And you select the fields to the ISD tool. You do your filters if you're doing query, and you can set it up. So when using ISD queries and uploads, business classes can just be keyed in directly. You just key it in directly rather than have to searching through a list. So it actually makes it a little quicker and easier to do this. Additionally, one of the great things about ISD uploads is they're set up very similarly to the queries. So whereas you had to build a different tool in S3 to do a query versus an upload, in ISD, you can actually build a query, pull the data down, modify the data, and upload directly from that query and go right back into the system because it's all the kind of the same thing. The other nice thing about the ISD queries is you can actually build them for a specific purpose. So as an example, we've built queries for journal entry uploads before, where you create your header and you upload your lines. You can standardize this. You build a query, you set up Excel, and you could email it to your entire department to use. You can have a template there, and people can grab and use it at will, and it makes things a lot easier rather than having to key in, 50 lines into a journal entry manually. Both systems, though, for queries, have the ability to link queries to other related tables. So if you know your S3 queries, you could actually do related tables and pull data. The same process works for ISD, where you could link it to other related tables. So you could build some pretty cool queries. And that's kind of one of the reasons I like queries so much, especially with S3, because using a GL90 is a little bit limiting sometimes, and you can grab a lot more fields using add-ins. The same thing applies to ISD, but less so because the list view gives you so much more flexibility right out of the box that you kind of end up using ISD just a little bit less. One of the next items I'd like to discuss is the transaction analysis, and the similarities and differences are included in both S3 and FSM. So analyzing data is a large part of what an accountant does every month. One of the tools in S3 that I know I used quite a bit was the GL90 for transaction analysis. Part of the reason I also used add-ins was you can pull the same table, but pull a lot more data a lot faster, and that's kind of why I like queries so much. This is a go-to though for me when I was working as client. Pretty much always had this open sitting on a screen somewhere with GL90, constantly pulling through that. S3 users are familiar with it. To analyze transaction level data in the system, you can pull one company, one accounting unit, and account for a specified time period. This data has a beginning balance, activity, and ending balance with selection. So as an S3 user, you can export the data into a CSV file and manipulate the data in Excel if you need it after you pull it out. FSM uses tools such as a counter analysis tool to provide transaction level analysis for users as well. FSM retains the ability to export data as a CSV file as well as other formats like Excel. So I can, pull an Excel file. It's a little bit cleaner than CSV, so I tend to kind of use that quite a bit. Both systems have the ability to drill down into the data to the source file as well, directly from the tab. So as we talked about with the lists, once you get your transaction data, you can just drill right into the source file if needed. So the FSM account analysis tool can be set up initially for a reconciliation and can be saved in a list form for future use. So there's the list again. Thing is like with GL90, you have to open it up and set it up or pull it from a GL95. This, you could actually set it up and reuse it as many times as you want. So if I happen to, let's say, look at my AP accrual account, I may save that out there. So all I have to do is reopen it every month, change the month, and then look at the data within. So it makes things just a little bit faster and easier as kind of a time saver. So both the accounting unit and account hierarchies can be used to review the data summary at the account level. So if you have basically you can look at things hierarchy level now. You're not limited to one accounting unit. You can actually look at income statement, balance sheet, or any of the other pieces of your account or accounting unit hierarchies right there. So that is kind of a benefit of the account analysis tool. You could also filter by all the dimensions. So one of the things that Mark talked about earlier when we were discussing the chat item was dimensions. All these dimensions can also be filtered on in the account analysis tool. So if you have multiple, I'll use project as an example, there's a dimension there for you. You can actually search by project on this and pull this directly in here. If you have different hierarchies set up, modify it and sub out the hierarchies in here. So if I have multiple hierarchies set up for my accounting units, I could actually sub those in and analyze the stuff in a different fashion. So once your settings are set, you hit save and analyze accounts, and it actually opens up the analysis for data reconciliation. When the report is run, the resulting data is presented in two sections like a GL90. Top section has your beginning balance activity and ending balance, as you can see. Bottom section actually includes the transaction level data selection. So from this point, you can view additional details by clicking the transactions button or the blue hyperlink in the activity field. So what you don't see actually though above this is all your options that I just couldn't fit on the screen, but they are there, and you can actually maintain it directly from here. You don't have to go into the setup anymore. So there's actually the additional tool called structures, as you can see right here next to the chart. And that particular structures, it's where you can override those structures we were talking about if you had multiple structures set up. That way you can actually pull a different structure and then look at your hierarchy in a different way. So when you click the View Transactions button at the bottom, it returns the transactions, as you can see down here. Users can extract the resulting data directly into Excel at this point using the ellipsis on the right-hand side. You can view up to 200 rows at a time through the selection at the bottom. You can drill into this at this point and go back to the source if you need to. The other way that we talked about earlier was clicking on the hyperlink itself. So when you click on that, additional page opens. It looks a little bit like this. You get another sprint screen here, which gives me my GL totals. And as I click on any of these totals here, what it does is it actually shows my transactions at the bottom. Something a little bit different here is this is actually set up by system. So it's system and date. So the totals are totals for a specific kind of set of data. And so one of the nice things about this is you could actually filter those totals on the system. So if I'm looking for journal entries, for instance, and I'm looking for it in an account, I can actually filter it on the system and just show my journal entries here, which is actually a great thing once you get comfortable with the different way that the totals work here. That actually works. You can drill in from here as well. You can extract the data into PDF, and any of the tools you see on the analysis tool are also available by themselves. There are tools for totals, there's tools for transactions, there's tools for transactions detail. Whatever you need, they have it. All in list view, and really, really functional. And honestly, the account analysis tool is a great thing. So it's kind of all right there. One of the next items I want to talk about is actually the differences in the budgeting platform in S3 and FSM. Budgeting in FSM is a bit of a departure from what you're used to in S3. So in S3, budgets were stored in SP20 for operating budgets and AC20 for activity budgets. FSM stores budgets in a word called scenarios. These track capital and operating budgets in exactly the same way. There's a reason that FSM can do this. It actually involves directly with the dimensions we discussed earlier, and also kind of how projects are handled in FSM, which is differently, and we will talk about that in a couple of minutes. Different scenarios are assigned different numbers when created. So in this case, let's say I have a scenario 5, which is my operating budget, and scenario 7 is my CapEx budget. Under each of these scenarios, what are called child scenarios. These child scenarios roll up under the parent scenario when analyzing data. So all the child scenarios under scenario 5 are all rolled up under scenario 5. These scenarios will be initially set up by the budgeting manager or the consultants, and are set to ready once they're complete. You can modify these scenarios with additional incremental budget loads or by change requests performed by the budgeting accountants. So one of the primary tasks in both S3 and FSM relating to the budget is the loading and modification of data within the budgeting space. There are a few ways to load the budget data into a scenario once the budget is set to ready. The first is called a budget import. It's actually an incremental load. This is a similar process to the initial setup import, and the import process is done after setting up the scenario initially. So the difference being that when a budget is set to ready, the user must do an incremental load to a budget or a couple of other budget changes, which we'll discuss later. When setting up or appending a budget scenario with a new year of budget data, for instance, lines are loaded into the import tab for uploading into the scenario. The import tab is a good holding point to review the data before it's loaded into the system to ensure accuracy. Once reviewed, a user can then do an incremental load to import these new lines to the existing budget. Import tabs can be loaded manually or via ISD upload from an Excel document, speeding up the overall process. So that same ISD stuff we were talking about with the journal entry, we can be able to actually load that load that directly off of directly off of an ISD as well, and load it directly into the import tab. To be honest, if you only have a few lines, keying the data may be faster. If you're loading an entire budget, I would absolutely use an ISD. Lines are loaded one by one and by date and dimension. So that is actually a difference. So S3, you load an entire, accounting unit, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 through 12. In this case, you actually load sort of each data point, right? You load every data point for every dimension that you happen to be loading for that budget. So that's a little bit of a departure that FSM has from S3. So budgets loaded in this fashion will create new lines for new year data or overriding existing data. So as an example, I have 450,000 in revenue in a particular period, and I actually want it to be 500K for this period. So I would load the 500K to that same accounting unit account and period, and it will replace that 450 with the 500. One of the other things with it that I may have forgot to mention is that child scenario with an incremental load. That child scenario stays at scenario 6, and it does not actually replace and create a new scenario. The reason I bring that up is that is a little different with a change request. So a change request is another way of importing data into the budget. This process leaves a more robust audit trail for budget managers to monitor loads to the budget. What I mean by that is you actually create a header and you load the lines to that header, and you actually have to release that. And so each change request is identified and separate. So you will know if somebody made a change request. So one major difference with the change request is it actually adjusts rather than replaces it. So using that same example, I have a 450K in revenue. I want to update it to 500. I will load a 50K change to that budget, and that will increase it to 500. So this process is kind of better suited for uploading changes for a refined forecast versus an actual complete load. The reason that is it actually loads to a different child scenario. So it creates a different child scenario. So where like if the main one was 6, this could be a 10 or a 12. When you look at the whole budget, it nets everything together. And then you can look at the original budget, which will exclude that, which works, but to me, that's why you would want to use an incremental load for a new budget year. Another option to make changes is the quick change. Quick changes allow users to make changes to specific lines on a budget if loaded in there. That user can move all accounts between accounting units, one account using this process. This would be good to use if the budget managers find one line or accounting unit needs to be changed. You can move a budget from one to another for a budget year with this tool rather than importing the adjustments. So the final topic that I want to be discussing today are the changes within the activity module between S3 and FSM. There are 2 key differences in FSM versus F3 that impact the activity module. So first, the activity module in FSM is now called projects. So what it was used to be activities is projects. So you hear when we talk with FSM projects, we're really meaning activities in this case. The second in FSM is that a project, the project or activities is now a dimension of the general ledger. It's in the accounting string rather than on a separate module. So it actually ties the project module directly to the general ledger in this case. So you don't actually have to maintain that module separately. It is the same thing. It makes actually a lot easier, in my opinion, to manage in FSM than previous versions of S3. You don't have to reconcile projects or activities anymore. It's all one thing. So as we know, S3 activity management is used for tracking capital projects, grants, and other long-term initiative, that then it sat on a separate module like we were just discussing. It's required users to reconcile the different systems, which we don't need to anymore. It makes it a huge difference. It'll never be out of sync. One of the other nice things is a lot of the reporting for activities can be flip-flopped with the general ledger. So the activity project suite has a great reporting suite in there, and you can kind of use for both. So hierarchies was one of the things we talked about also in that in the question earlier. So their same flexible hierarchy process works for that works for accounting units and accounts, and other dimensions also applies to projects. Flexible hierarchies allow you to kind of move things between summary projects. You can change your hierarchies. You can actually create multiple hierarchies if you like. It's an easy way of maintaining projects, and it definitely gives you a lot of functionality there, I think. But this is why when we talked about budgets, because it's kind of handled in the same way, it's a dimension of the global ledger now, you can actually budget projects and operating budgets at the same time, the same way. It's just another dimension which you're budgeting to using a different scenario. So you're no longer having to go to AC20 to create a whole separate budget. You can pretty much have the same process that works for everything. You just have different dimensions that you're budgeting for. And like I said before, with projects being part of the GL, that gives you a lot of reporting options. And the reporting suite for projects is great. There's just so much you can do with it, and it's really a nice suite of reports. So that is the end of what I had to discuss on the S3 versus FSM items. I'm going to leave it open for any more questions that we have. So anybody have any other questions that we can go over?
Nothing in the chat right now.
Okay. So just a little reminder. The next quarterly informative Friday series will be starting in July. So, and here's the rest of them for June. We've got config console and IPAs and process improvements. We also have beginner guide to IPAs also. So all of these happening Friday, June the 18th. Also the following month, reports list in accused of managing supply chain and another beginner's guide to IPAs. So there's a bunch more stuff coming in June and even more stuff coming in July. So I guess that's it for me. So I really appreciate everybody's time.
All right, thanks, John. And to wrap it up, please continue to visit our social media sites to check for updates on when we have Informative Friday presentations. You can also go to balesllc.com or email molly.velasco@balesllc.com to register. And we'll leave you with parting thoughts would be, if you have any questions or need any advice or help with your Infor system, we have a service called Coffee with Consultants. Essentially, we'll give you 30 minutes to speak with one of our consultants at no charge to you, that you can bring up any topic related to anything you own in the Infor system. And we will help you with some guidance and support and for 30 minutes. And just a good way to meet some folks, test drive our services, and get some help. So thank you again for attending today's Informative Fridays Encore presentation. I look forward to seeing you over the next 2 months, and have a good weekend.
You too. Thanks. Thanks, John. Bye.